JJ, the CPA here. Hope you're doing well. So this is part 2 of a 3-part video series, which is the most important financials for a small business owner to look at. Okay, so the 3 most important things for a small business owner to be looking at. The first one is, and on my other video, is that you need to be having cash basis financials. So there's a link to that video in the body of this. You need to check it out on why you must have cash basis financials. And tagged along with that is being able to look at a P&L that covers the last 12 months of your business in a whole month increment. But the other aspect I want you to look at here is I want you to ask for, and you might be getting it and you don't know, or you could get it and you just didn't know to ask for it, or you could get it and whoever's doing your books didn't think you'd care about it or want it. And it's not at all that whoever's doing your books was, not providing something to you that they should have per se, but it is something that I provide to every single solitary one of my clients, okay, in the history of my own practice, which is going into its 24th year, and that's the general ledger. Ask for the general ledger, okay? And what is the general ledger? The general ledger is the most important report to look at that's made up of the numbers that then arrive at the total numbers on your financial statements. Now, what does that mean? What that means is when you're looking at a profit and loss statement, an income statement, and it says parking $12,000, okay? Parking $12,000. The general ledger report is going to show you each transaction that made up that $12,000. So you want to see the general ledger to know how you arrived at $12,000. And even if in your head you're like, oh, well, we have this parking and we pay $1,000 a month and it was 12 months and so it's 12,000. Okay, well, I'm glad that you know that. That's great. But when you're looking at meals and entertainment or insurance or office supplies or rent, okay, looking at the general ledger, you're going to see what was included in that number on your P&L. You would want to know that. Period. You need to know that. You want to know that. And I guarantee that when you look at the general ledger, you're most likely going to go, oh, what is that expense? Oh, I didn't know we still were signed up for that. Or, well, no, that's not really insurance. That's a copier maintenance agreement, right? Because if you're going to look at financials, you want them to be as accurate as they are for you, right? So if you're looking at insurance, you're like, wow, we're spending, $14,000 on insurance. Interesting. And then you move on with life. But then you look at the general ledger and you're like, oh, well, included in there was this copier maintenance fee, which is $500. So there's $6,000 being spent on a copier maintenance fee that should be in a completely separate category. So your insurance is less than what you thought it was. And now there's either a new category or more expense in another type of expense than you realized. And many times you're like, wow, I didn't know we were paying $500 a month for copier maintenance. How is that possible? Do we need to look at it differently? I don't know, okay? But you need to know what makes up your numbers, and that's how you do it. It's the secret. It's the secret report, so to speak. But it's not secret at all. It's the most common. And for CPAs, EAs, and tax pros, bookkeepers, they want to see the general ledger. And if they don't, and they don't look at it, then I'd question how good they really are, no offense. But on that general ledger, here's where most people go, I don't even know what this means, okay? So here's the secret to looking at the secret report, the secret of looking at the general ledger, okay? Is that when you get the general ledger, it's going to include all of the details of your balance sheet. What's a balance sheet? It's your assets and your liabilities. It's your cash transactions or your bank transactions, your accounts payable. So here's my point, okay? Not at all am I saying ignore the first part of your general ledger, but what I'm saying for you, fresh looking at a general ledger, to now not give any excuses that it seemed overwhelming to you, because it's not possible if you'll just go and do this secret that I'm telling you about the general ledger. And that is this: flip through, keep flipping through, keep flipping through, keep flipping through, keep flipping through, depending on how many it is. Keep flipping through until you recognize an expense category. You're gonna know. I don't know how you would own a business and not know that, okay, and now I'm looking at advertising expense. How you're gonna know that? Because it's gonna say advertising, and now it's gonna have all these transactions, right? It's gonna have bank fees and then all of these transactions, right? It's gonna have copier expense and all these transactions. Keep flipping until you just recognize something, okay? Then, boom, stop. Now you're in the meat of it. Now you're in the part that's, I would say, the most important part to look at in a general ledger, which is the money that's going out, right? That's a pretty important part. And what you're looking at there then is if you've hit the expense section, then try and go back to the beginning of the expense section, and you can't get overwhelmed. I'm not gonna allow you to give me one excuse, because if all of a sudden you're down and you're looking at, taxes, well, you're in the T's, roll back, okay? Until you see that you're in the expenses. And then you're gonna see the details and you're like, wow, I love this report. This report makes sense to me. I see all these transactions. I see the vendors. Oh, I recognize that vendor. Oh, I recognize that vendor. Well, yeah, that's who we pay for that. Yeah, that's who we pay for that. Okay? It's like all of a sudden it's just an awakening to look at this general ledger. So the thing you want to look at this general ledger then is you're just looking at it. Like, does it make sense to you? It's not possible that this report, when you get to this section, wouldn't make sense to you. It is not possible, because now you're looking at, McDonald's, Taco Bell, whatever, restaurant in the meals. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then if you're like, you see AT&T and it's down in travel, you're like, well, what? Wait a second. How come AT&T, which depending on where you are in the country, that's a phone company, I'm sure you would know that. But why is that in travel? Shouldn't it be in telephone? Now all of a sudden, your numbers have come alive. You understand these numbers. Why? Because they're your numbers. They're your expenses. So that's the most important for me for you to look at. Now, the most important doesn't mean you just throw it away after that. Okay. The second most important is now you've gone and you've flipped through. And if you have a 200-page general ledger, you're probably in pages, 120 through 200, all your expenses. So now go back up some and maybe at a page 100, about halfway through, rough, I don't know. I'm not looking at your general ledger, but I'm trying to tell you is before your expenses. So as you're flipping through, you didn't probably realize it, but you now will be seeing your income that's been reported on your P&L and then your expenses. So the second thing to look at is just, okay, here's my income. So when you're looking at a P&L and you're like, okay, I brought in 125,000. Well, now looking at the general ledger, you should be seeing each deposit. Depending on your system, you might see each customer that makes it up, right? But you're now looking at, here's the income that came in, okay? Now, as you can tell, we're moving backwards through this, okay? I've moved you all the way through to expenses. Then I've moved you back into the report, okay? So once you've done that, guess what? Now you can go to page 1. You go all the way back to page 1. So just reiterate, if you have a 200-page general ledger, okay, you're going to probably get to, as a pure example, page 120, and that'd be where your expenses are. Probably where your income would be, like page 100. You see what I'm saying? I'm just trying to give you a scope of the order here. Now go all the way back to page 1. Page 1 is, here's all the transactions that went in your bank and out of your bank. All the deposits and all of the debits, and checks that you wrote, okay? So now you're looking at it from a completely different, you're looking at it as, here's what happened in my bank in date order. You're just looking at it, you're looking at it, you're looking at it, okay? But see, that right there gives you another look of just like what's in and out, what's in and out, what's this $50,000 deposit here, right? Then next are your other assets, and then next are your other liabilities, and then next is where you pull out equity, and then your income, and then your expenses. So I've probably got you hooked now. You're probably gonna look at that general ledger and like, oh my gosh, this has come alive. So when you go back and you look at your banking activity, here's the thing to know. Everything that hits your bank in and out, okay, is somewhere else in that general ledger, okay? That's just one side of the entry. When they talk about debits and credits, you don't even need to understand debits and credits. What you need to understand is When it hit your bank, that was one side of the transaction, or when it left your bank, it was one side of the transaction. In or out was one side of the transaction. It's going to show up one time in that banking activity in your general ledger, okay? The other side of the entry, okay, is going to be somewhere else in that general ledger. And I just told you where it's going to be. Because after your cash position, it's anything that's related to assets, anything related to liabilities, anything related to equity, anything related to income, and then anything related to expenses. And now you see your financials come alive. Now you see your numbers come alive. Okay? So what activity would you see in your assets? Well, that I bought stuff. Okay? That'd probably be about the activity you would see in your assets. This would be fixed assets, your accounts receivables, right? And people that owe you money. You'd be like, oh, okay, so there's the transactions related to that. What are transactions related to your liabilities? Paying off liabilities, borrowing money, new loans, paying off loans. So you're seeing that activity. You know, and you might be looking at it and going like, okay, we have this loan and there's no payments on it. Because when you're looking through your general ledger, you're going to see loan and then no activity. And then the next item, you're like, whoa, wait a second. Aren't we making monthly payments? And you're going to realize that whoever's been doing your books, they haven't been booking principal amounts to the liabilities. I'm going to digress because all of a sudden you're going to understand these numbers. And even if you don't, then keep spending a little time. And even if the beginning part is a little overwhelming, so what? Then go back to the end and start looking at your expenses. Refresh your mind what it is it's looking at. What you're looking at is the actual transactions that are occurring in your business that are making up the numbers on a P&L and a balance sheet, your income statement and your assets and liabilities. So your balance sheet is, and I talked about this in other videos, it's just a picture of one day in time. Here's how much money I have in the bank on this date. Here's what people owe me in accounts receivable on this date. Okay, a P&L is a period of time. So when you're looking at a balance sheet and it's April 30th, then you should be looking at a P&L that ends April 30th, right? That's how those things correlate. But when you're looking at a general ledger and you're looking at April 30, you would be looking at whatever activity is making up that same period of time in your P&L. Okay, sounds like a lot. It's not. These are the most basic set of financials in the history of financials. It's an income statement and a balance sheet. It can't get any simpler than that. So when you have an income statement and you have a balance sheet, I'm telling you the two dates to match it up. Can't even be hard. It can't be hard, okay? Whatever the end date is on your P&L, that's the same date you're going to do the balance sheet because it's a one day in time, okay? If you're looking at a P&L through 3/31, what would be your balance sheet date? What would it be? Your P&L ends March 31st. It's January 1st through March 31st on your P&L. So what date should your balance sheet be, right? 3/31. Gotcha? 3/31. Then when you're looking at a general ledger, the period of time that it needs to be is the same period of time as your P&L because the general ledger is the transactions. So when I'm sitting with a client, every single solitary client, period, the end, without exception, never, ever, not this way. Here's your P&L client, here's your balance sheet client, and here's your general ledger client. We look at a couple of things and then we go on the P&L and on the balance sheet and then we dive into the general ledger. We dive into the general ledger because even though I'm this client's CPA for the last 22 years, we're gonna look at the transactions together. Is there something that doesn't make sense? So I had a client here recently, we're looking through, I'm like, I don't recognize this stuff here. And it's like, I don't recognize it either. Turns out there was fraud. Turns out someone had hacked his bank account and he had almost $10,000 taken out in about a 45-day period. And it was only because we were looking at the general ledger together. And it was only because even though I'm that person's CPA and I've been working with them forever, I don't have the arrogance of assuming I know that client's numbers better than they do. How is the client going to know the numbers are right without looking at the general ledger has been my philosophy from minute one. So you need to ask for the general ledger. You need to look at the general ledger. I won't accept one excuse from you on that it's confusing because that just means that before you even open the PDF, before you even started to flip the pages, you've already decided that you're confused by it and it's overwhelming and you don't understand it. So what you need to do is take a deep breath, Go have a drink of water, jump up and down, do some jumping jacks, watch your favorite video, listen to some of your favorite song or something, and conjure up the confidence here, okay, that you're looking at the most basic numbers that are yours, and you really have no excuse that you could tell me on why you can't understand them or it's confusing to you, because that just means you decided it was going to be confusing to you. You've just made that decision, period. Because unless you don't know how to read and you don't know what numbers are, okay, that's the only way I would accept from you that you can't understand your financials, is that you can't read, you can't write, you don't know what numbers are. You could be looking at a 2 or a 5 and you wouldn't know the difference. Okay, then you're not going to understand these financials. But when you look at these numbers and you look at that general ledger, which is not a secret anymore, right? You're looking at this secret report. And then the secret to looking at it is looking at your expenses. I guarantee you're like, wow, this makes sense. Okay. So when I'm looking here, so when you look at your P&L and you go parking, $12,000, you're going to find in your general ledger in the same order, you're going to look, 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 you're going to look. And it's somehow, some way, period, the end, it's not even possible. You're going to find parking in your general ledger, and then you're going to see all the details that make up the $12,000. If you can just do that one thing, right? Whether it's travel, insurance, telephone, meals, office supplies, pick one item on your P&L and find it in your general ledger. You can do that, okay? You can do that. General ledger, you're going to flip through, okay? And you go, okay, so these are the transactions that make up that. And if you know that, then you know the rest of everything. Because then you're going to pick another line item on your P&L and you're going to go, okay, I looked, what's in insurance? You're going to flip and you're going to find insurance. It's any good set of financials, any good P&L is going to be in the expenses, alphabetical order, advertising, bank fees, computer expense, depreciation, right? You look through, you go, what's in insurance? And you find, oh, there's insurance. Okay, so when I'm looking at my P&L, that's what insurance is. It's these transactions. Okay, it's not good enough for you to know your bank balance in the morning. Congratulations, you know how to log in and see your bank balance. Not saying that you shouldn't do that, but that is no offense, the dumbest way to run a business. It's the dumbest way, and it's probably the best way for you to guarantee that you're either making $1 million a day and you have a $75 million bank balance, and it wouldn't matter what you do, when you do it, other than gambling in one hand an $80 million bet. Knowing what your bank balance is tells you nothing about your business. All it tells you is the amount of money in the bank. Doesn't tell you checks that you wrote that haven't gone out the door. Doesn't tell you about money that's coming in tomorrow. Okay. Many small business owners tell me like, well, I don't need to see from my financials because I look at my bank balance every morning. It has nothing to do with nothing. Look at it every morning. Good, look at it. But these numbers are black and white. They're showing you a history. They're showing you a picture. And why? Why? Because when you understand your numbers, you understand your business, as the prophet says, CNBC. When you understand your numbers, you're going to make better decisions going forward. It's going to start with, are we spending 12 grand on parking? Well, what is this expense? What is that expense? Oh man. So for the last 10 years, when I've been looking at insurance, it's included a copier maintenance charge. So my copier maintenance fees have not shown up on this, and my insurance has been higher than I thought. So I've been making terrible decisions. I never thought to look at whether or not I should change my copier maintenance fee because I've only been looking at a P&L, and I had no idea that I was even spending $6,000 a year on copier maintenance fee. And when I was sitting here making about decisions about insurance and where do I want to renew and where do I want to go, my insurance has been higher than what the reality is because I didn't look at the details of it. You didn't look at the general ledger. See how on two simple, ridiculous expense items, you would not be making good decisions as you move forward. Your insurance is not a proper amount on your P&L, and your copier expense is not a proper amount on your P&L. How can you make one decision in your business and not even know that that is the proper numbers? Right? Now, if you're just making business decisions based on how you feel and, well, I need this and it's $500, okay? Then you need to go to my third video, and we're going to talk about how you now take cash basis financials, which is in my first video. You've now looked at your general ledger, cash basis general ledger, right? Real simple, okay? But now in that general ledger and tied to your cash basis financials, I'm going to tell you the third thing that every small business owner needs to do, period, the end, because most likely, most small business owners that I work with, 88% of them, okay? What they run through their business are expenses that not every business would run through. What does that mean? If you didn't own the business that you're in, most likely the business you'd be working for wouldn't pay your cell phone. If you were an employee of a business, they may not pay your car payment. They may not pay your kid's cell phone, okay, bill. When you own a company, rightfully so, it's not running through personal expenses. Rightfully so, you will have your business pay for things that if you did not own the business, most likely the business you'd be working for would not pay for such expenses. Does that make sense? So in this third video, this one is going to talk to you about how do you identify these things, how do you break it out, and why? Because you need to know how your business is actually doing. You need to know how your business is doing. So if you're just looking at a P&L and you're looking at a bunch of numbers, you probably don't have a full picture, right? You probably understand that now. You need to look at your general ledger. And now even looking at your general ledger, you're now going to see the details that go into this third video that will then make your cash basis financials that much better for you in making management decisions. And typically, let me tell you this, typically this exercise and going into the third video here brings elation and relief to every single small business owner that I've ever worked with by just tweaking what we're looking at here, just one extra step, so that you actually know how your business is doing as it relates to what the business's expenses are. So, all right, hey, I've got a playlist, Learning with JJ the CPA. I've got other things in there, and look for the third video to come. I've got a link into the first one that talks about cash basis financials, and we will continue this 3-video series on the most important things a small business owner needs to look at related to their financials. All right, hey, thanks for tuning in. I'd love it if you'd subscribe, and then don't you ever forget, you've never met a CPA quite like me.